Can we talk about the blood-brain barrier and how it breaks down? Like hypoglycemia can be an example of that, and how excitotoxins can pass through that on occasion.
Yeah, the blood-brain barrier is one of the big defenses that the industry always gives. They say, well, these things can't get through the blood-brain barrier. I did rather extensive research in this area, and what I discovered was that there are numerous conditions that we're all subjected to that cause the breakdown of the normal blood-brain barrier. Number one is aging. As we age, our blood-brain barrier begins to deteriorate. It becomes porous. So that anything we eat will pass through the blood into the brain. Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, all of these diseases are associated with the breakdown of the blood-brain barrier. Strokes, even silent strokes, produce a breakdown of the blood-brain barrier. Exposure to certain pesticides, herbicides will break down the blood-brain barrier. Hypoglycemia will break it down. Certain drugs will cause it to break down. Free radical generation will cause it to break down. Well, we know many of the diseases are caused by free radicals, like diabetes. You can have very high free radical levels. Extreme exercise, you produce a lot of free radicals. All of this breaks down the blood-brain barrier. Multiple sclerosis, autoimmune diseases, lupus, all these things are associated with the breakdown of the blood-brain barrier. So we know there are millions and millions of people out there who have, at one time or another, a very porous blood-brain barrier. So when they drink a Diet Cola or they eat MSG, it passes right into their brain very easily. The other thing that we discovered was that even if you had a completely normal, intact blood-brain barrier, if you expose that person to a high dose of these excitotoxins over a prolonged period of time, it will seep past the barrier into the brain.
I'm not the guardian of the White House or the guardian of the door to the president. People write about that and they speculated. I suppose part of it's inertia from previous periods, but the president is a grown man. He's perfectly capable of working up his own schedule, and he does.
Donald Rumsfeld had worked at the White House when the president of Pepsi-Cola, Donald Kendall, had been the closest personal advisor, non-government advisor, to Richard Nixon. And they were buddies. I mean, Kendall had been at the kitchen debate at the World's Fair when he debated Khrushchev and said, you know, we have household goods and you guys don't, and so forth, and made a big name for himself. And Pepsi-Cola had been the company that had picked up Nixon as their lawyer when he lost for governor in California. And Kendall and Nixon were very, very close. And Rumsfeld got this tremendous boost from Kendall that pushed the product out into the food supply. There was a study done by the Centers for Disease Control in which 30% of the people who had complained about NutraSweet to the FDA, there were 650 complaints at that point, 30% of them had had a reaction, gone off the NutraSweet, then gone back on the NutraSweet, either accidentally or purposely, and had the same reaction.
Absolutely. When you look at the data that is actually compiled by the FDA, year in and year out, the single biggest food or single ingredient that produces the largest number of adverse event complaints to the FDA is aspartame. In 1997, for example, 80% of the complaints filed to the FDA on adverse food reactions were caused by aspartame. And unfortunately, you're looking at the influence of big money here.
Before it was approved.
Dr. Jerry Goyen was the FDA commissioner then.
I looked at that, read it at the time, obviously, and said that, well, what we had to do next was set up an internal committee of people who had played no part in previous studies of aspartame.
But Goyen never had the chance to review the results. That's because he was forced to step down in 1981, when newly elected President Ronald Reagan appointed a new commissioner. That commissioner quickly approved the use of aspartame for dry foods like cookies and pudding mix. Just 2 years later, he okayed it for carbonated drinks. We tracked down that FDA commissioner, Dr. Arthur Hall Hayes.
Hi, Dr. Hayes.
Yes?
My name's Aline Sergani with Fox 5 in Washington.
Yes?
Can we ask you a few questions about aspartame?
FDA has all the information you need.
Yes, but sir, you were the FDA commissioner when aspartame was approved. And so we'd like
understand
to
that.
ask you a few questions.
No, I really have no comments. All the information is available to Food and Drug
Sir,
Administration.
don't you think it's your responsibility as the FDA commissioner when aspartame was approved to answer some of our questions?
Not now. I'm no longer commissioner of the FDA.
Do you think the public was
No,
ever
I
put at
really-
risk? Sir, was the public ever put at risk?
You have to realize what this little blue packet is really worth. Searle sells millions of dollars of aspartame each year. It's used in nearly 6,000 products.
I think that there were a lot of politics involved in its being approved.
A lot of people share the senator's viewpoint, so Fox 5 obtained these campaign contribution records. They show that Searle made contributions to several senators involved in keeping aspartame on the market. Senator Howell Heflin received at least $5,000. Searle also contributed at least $3,000 to Senator Orrin Hatch. Senator Robert Byrd got $1,000, and Representative Henry Waxman also received a $1,000 contribution. And that's not all. We also learned that several federal officials were investigated for possible ties to Searle. The Monsanto webpage links sites belonging to the American Diabetes Association and the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. Both organizations have published articles supporting NutraSweet. Monsanto does not mention its large contributions to both nonprofit groups.
The other person would have pulled the trigger. These foods that have now been made illegal, raw goat milk, raw juice, raw anything. I mean, especially raw products. I mean, you can't go to the Whole Foods and the farmer's market anymore because they're controlled by the health department. There's no way. Since that point, they have backed off. But they've backed off, I think, because they see how much exposure they have created. We only consider this, my friend George, an opportunity to take this information to the masses at this point. So they've actually given us the opportunity to take this to the masses.